Good morning. My name is Ife Senachi Nana, called Nana. And tomorrow, much of this country will celebrate Columbus Day. It is no secret at this point that Columbus Day in 1492 was just the beginning of a terrible and brutal history of violence and oppression toward indigenous people of the Americas. Columbus and those who followed were obsessed with conversion, brought diseases, and ultimately desecrated entire peoples and cultures. Today, we want to acknowledge this history. Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta conducts spiritual services, classes, and gatherings on the stolen territory of the Muskogee, the Creek people. Today, we turn our conscious attention to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. We give praise and honor to the original stewards of the land we occupy and further dedicate ourselves to a consciousness of inclusion, healing, and restoration.
Descendants of mound builders, the Muskogee people were expelled from their ancestral lands, which include the areas now known as Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. Before the United States government stole their homelands, they lived in sophisticated, autonomous tribal towns that together formed a multi-part union known as the Muskogee Creek Confederacy. Most Muskogee in the area of present-day Georgia were speakers of Hittichi, one of the multiple Muskogean languages and one of the many indigenous languages which has perished due to European invasion and genocide. Other cultural practices, like the sharing of all property and making communal decisions by consensus, were extirpated in the process of forced assimilation with the economy and culture of European colonists. Many indigenous religious practices were outlawed in the United States by the government or restricted due to lack of access to sacred sites and water.
The Muskogee people were repeatedly forced to defend their land at great loss as British, French, and Spanish factions battled for control of the area. Many Muskogee left their ancestral homelands after signing treaties with the United States in the early 1800s, often without receiving the compensation promised in the treaties. Most relocated to Indian Territory in Oklahoma, but tens of thousands who refused to leave were forcibly removed by the U.S. Army following the Indian Removal Act of the Trail of Tears. Although precise numbers are poorly documented, it is estimated that nearly half of Muskogee people lost their lives on the Trail of Tears. Those who survived were met with more disease, starvation, and injustice upon their arrival to Indian Territory. Today, the Muskogee people are spread between Alabama, Oklahoma, and other areas of the southeastern U.S. The lasting effects of colonization and genocide are glaringly apparent in the economic, social, and judicial injustices that indigenous people suffer at the hands of the U.S. government. Additionally, monuments to colonizers, slavers, and murderers are still prominent throughout our city and country, including here in Atlanta, Georgia, as exemplified by the eminent thoroughfare Ponce de Leon Avenue, a street named for a man who led European expeditions to Turtle Island in pursuit of gold and a mythical fountain of youth, resulting in brutal genocide, enslavement of native peoples, and the spread of disease.
I'm crying because the blood of these people runs through my veins. I am Creek Indian. My grandmother was from that tribe. And today we are called to remember and to initiate the healing beginning with our own consciousness. As we open to healing the wounds of separation from within, we become carriers of wholeness to the collective body. We use water as our ritual element today. Water is more than simply a metaphor. It is an elemental and primary calling forth feelings of awe and reverence, acknowledging that the ocean is considered by many to be the place from which all life on our planet came. It is the womb of life, and that amniotic waters surround each of us prenatally. We choose water as our symbol of our empowerment. Water connects each of us to Mother Earth, as well as connects us across the land via the many rivers, tributaries, waterways that served as the source of life for Indigenous tribes. We recognize SLCA as a source of spiritual life and connection for people across Turtle Island, and include each place in our consciousness today, several of which will be included in the libation recognition ceremony that we are now initiate. We begin with where we are. From the unceded territory of the Muskogee Creek tribe, known today as Atlanta, Georgia, we pour out our libations and blessings in remembrance of the Muskogee and Creek peoples, my people, our people. Ashe. Asheo.
From the unceded territory of the Great and Little Osage Nation, known today as Kansas City, Missouri, we pour out a libation and a blessing of remembrance for the Osage, Kickapoo, Kaw, and the Osheti people.
From the unceded territory of the Wapakudi, known today as St. Paul, Minnesota, we pour out a libation and blessing of remembrance for the Wapakudi peoples.
From the unceded territory of the Ute, the Pueblos, and the Ikaria Apache, now known as Taos, New Mexico, we pour out libation and offer a blessing of remembrance. For the Ute peoples, for the Pueblos peoples, for the Ikaria Apache peoples.
In honor of the original inhabitants of this land, now known as Northwest Oregon, we honor the land. The Douglas firs, the cedars, the oaks, the redwoods that gave homes and sustenance to the Native Americans who also occupied this land. We mourn the now gone salmon that fed the bodies of these Indigenous people. Unfortunately, the colonization of this land, trees, and resources continues today. And from the unceded territory of Kalapuya, the Clackamas, the Tualatin Native peoples on the lands and lakes of Chief Oswego, we pour out a libation and blessing of remembrance for these sovereign peoples.
From the unceded territory of the Shasta, Tequilma, Modoc, and Klamath tribes, known today as Ashland, Oregon, I pour out a libation and blessing of remembrance for the tribes of the Shasta, Tequilma, Modoc, and
Having heard and received the blessings and libation recognition from the various places across Turtle Island where the message of the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta is received, we give thanks. We ask now that these prayers and blessings are received by our ancestors who guide us in the ways of healing, reconciliation, and forgiveness. We pray for justice in our relationships with others. We pray for reconciliation with all who share this land. We pray at this time for healing, for justice, and for reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. We affirm that this ceremony has initiated by right of consciousness a new dedication to truth, wholeness, and community. Ashe, and so it is.